Hey everybody, welcome back for another session with myself and Bryce here on Unfiltered here at KipperTie. There's been a bit of news in between. We've been off the air, shall we say, for a fair while there.
Just a couple of months.
Yeah.
I mean, there was Christmas in the middle.
There was, yeah, but life kind of got in the way for a little while there. You guys have been very busy on production.
We have. We've visited 4 countries since the last stream.
Yeah, and you disaster followed you wherever you went, rather sadly. You were in Washington when some scary things were happening.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. The plane crash that was in the news and other political things all happening where we were shooting, which was quite...
Yeah, a bit alarming.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah. So it's been an exciting little time. News as far as cameras go, obviously Red are very excited to have launched their Z-mount versions of the Raptor and Komodo. I'm going to say Z-mount. I know there's loads of people out there who are saying Z back at me. Yeah.
We're British.
We're British, it's a Z. So we'll live with that from this point on. It's a really interesting thing, actually. It was very widely predicted with Nikon buying Red. It's a very obvious thing for them to do. They have a mount really quite similar to the RF mount, which means that it's not a major re-engineering job.
Yeah.
But of course, like a lot of these things, it feels a little bit out of the blue when it happens, because they have to keep stuff, under wraps until it's ready to be shown. As far as I can see, there are some improvements to autofocus being touted and some other stuff, but it's still relying on the same hardware. So we're not talking about the exact same capabilities that people are seeing with the Nikon cameras. Quite a different story.
Yeah, the camera behind the mount is the same camera, right?
Yeah. Nothing's really changed back there. I think there's clearly some software, some firmware stuff that Nikon have been able to contribute to, and particular, if you're talking direct to one of their Z-mount lenses, then that's going to make a lot more sense. Obviously, I think there's been a lot of people saying, why, what's the purpose of this? I mean, obviously it's Nikon's, therefore it makes sense for them to do it, but who owns Z-mount lenses and shoots motion content? It's a pretty small niche. I mean, the Z8's fantastic camera, really impressive. That works, and I know people are using that for production work. But it's still it's a niche within a niche, isn't it?
Very much.
But I feel like it's not that long ago we were saying the same thing about the RF mount. What on earth is that doing on a production camera?
Yeah.
And
then
now
everybody had to buy adapters.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's lovely for us. We sit in the middle and try and add some value where that adaptation takes place.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it could represent for some people just another adapter that they need. The interesting part for me is it's yet another step towards a shallower mount. So the shallower it gets, the more space there is to do things in between the camera and a robust industry standard lens like a PL.
Yeah.
And realistically, I mean, PL is an ancient standard at this point, but it is still the standard. It's what people are looking for. And yeah, it just means that it's another kind of adaptation that's needed. What's interesting to me, though, is that all of these mounts really, they're so incredibly similar, and yet they've mostly been judged to sit in a niche on their own, so adaptation is possible. Yeah. So you almost get this situation where people assume in the sort of consumer sphere, oh, there's a new mount, that's fine, there'll be an adapter. Surely I can go from this to this, from that to that, because it seems like just about every permutation is covered. There's a few nasty exceptions. A frustrating one is obviously for people shooting and investing in RF gear, whether it's lenses or adapters, they can't adapt RF to Z.
It's too shallow, right?
Yeah, there's no room.
Shallow.
Yeah, and they occupy the same space as one another.
Same as E-mount.
Yeah, well, it's interesting. E-mount is very, very shallow as well, it has a little catch, and I don't know, actually, we'll show you some examples here. If Boris can grab the camera. So this is some parts from our own production. So these are not necessarily indicative of any particular lens, but this is an E-mount bayonet that we would put on the back of one of our products. And the interesting thing when you compare that, just in terms of its physical size, to a number of these other mounts. So here's an L mount, a Z mount, and RF. The E mount is quite small in terms of its diameter. It can actually fit inside of the Z mount. So it is possible to adapt Z mount to E mount, which, there's going to be people who are really interested in that. There's a company called Megadap who are making some what seem like virtually impossible adapters. Basically, they go from Z mount to E mount and translate the electronic functions at the same time.
Yeah.
This is something that I've shied away from a great deal because you've tested various adaptations from one mount type to another. Particularly
it's always a problem.
E-mount.
And it's always fine until you hit record, and then it's a problem.
Yeah, exactly. Having something production safe like that is a different story. Fine when it's a manual adaptation, but as soon as you start translating the electronics, it gets scary. It doesn't, you either need it to be implemented directly in the camera, or something that we've looked at in the past, although it's not something we've pushed through with, is just directly controlling the lens with the adapter mount. So you say, okay, behave as if you are actually just the camera, control the mount directly. But of course, it's another layer that the user doesn't necessarily want to have to do. It's not slick. Anyway, the guys at Megadap so far seem to be the class of the field in terms of actually making that stuff work without major risks, major failings. And I know our friends at CVP are going to be testing a hell of a lot of different stuff on that front. So far, particularly their offerings for Z to E-mount, they also have a Z to EF protocol as well.
Okay.
Admittedly, it's not inside the same kind of robust structure that we're talking about. These are photographic adapters. They're not really production ready, but there's some very interesting stuff going on there, and obviously we'll be talking with those guys further on that front. What they're doing with the firmware is key, and like I say, so far it's been the only stuff that I've seen that is seeming to be pretty reliable. There's still caveats. The stuff that is slightly alarming. Make sure that we get very blasé about hot swapping lenses. It's very easy to just think, well, it's, the camera should know what to do. I'll take my electronic lens off, put another one on. It's really interesting, actually, that if you read the product manual for a lot of Canon cameras, even going back to EF mount, the manufacturer doesn't really want you hot swapping lenses. There's quite a lot of, use caution, power down, etc. Even though it's, arguably it's built to be used in that quick and, kind of on the hop kind of way. Yeah. But they don't like it. And it's understandable, Well, you've got electronic pins crossing each other. Yes. Exactly. That's it. And, it's fairly intelligently designed so that things only power up at the right moment, and, things are negotiated properly. But it does leave you open to issues. And, where you have an adapter that also does electronic things. I mean, if you think about the process, it is acting as a full-on translator in between the two things. It is having to be a lens as far as the camera is concerned, and a camera as far as the subsequent lens is concerned. And these two things don't talk the same language. There's no standard protocol. Absolutely not. No, these these are reverse-engineered protocols that So for a start, the people designing these adapters are having to work out what does this protocol consist of. And they're doing so inherently without a view of, any kind of internal documentation. without any kind of licensing. I mean, it's astonishing that it can be made to work at all. And honestly, where I've seen things so far where it's like, oh yeah, it works, kind of. Honestly, that's as far as I thought we were ever going to get. And it's remarkable, really, what the guys at Megadap are able to do with that. So, yeah, watch this space. We'll we're in conversation with them, and it'll be really interesting to see what we can do to bring that kind of tech to a more production-ready, solid piece of kit. For example, Z to EF. I know that's something that people are crying out for. That is going to be. EF lenses are out there in such large numbers.
Exactly.
It's still a good go-to. So yeah, interesting stuff going on with the transition to Z mount. Obviously, the RF isn't going away, so this just becomes yet another parallel thing.
More decisions for the user to make in terms of what they invest in, and
it's tricky. For sure. I wouldn't want to be making a camera purchase right at this exact moment necessarily. I would be having some long thought processes about, okay, which is the right route to go there. From the point of view of longevity, the Z mount makes sense with Red because of their current ownership. But that said, it's only really been retrofitted onto a body that we would presume has got a good few years in it still. So realistically, you would then be thinking about, well, what's the next generation beyond that?
Exactly. If you already own a RF mount.
Exactly.
No incentive.
It's very likely, I'm sure, that the majority of people who are grandfathered into the RF adaptations and the RF lenses are going to just say, well, that's me, that's where I've invested. I'm sure there's probably some motivation for Red to move away from that. Presumably that it's going to be, it feels probably a little daft to them to be paying licensing to Canon for something when they are effectively a subsidiary of Nikon. But cross-pollination of technology like that happens behind the scenes much more than people necessarily realise. Sony sensors are everywhere, for example. It's that crossing over of brand technology is not necessarily a problem, but it is quite a public one when it's right on the front of your camera. And
and everybody knows.
And everybody knows exactly what you're using and what you're doing. But yeah, like I say, interesting times. I think there's some advantage to be had. That shallower mount, if that becomes something that is continued with, it's giving yet more space for the user to define what do they put between their lens and their camera. And obviously, we have a vested interest here making things that do that job. So you would expect to hear that from me. But, Red are continuing at this point with this philosophy that what happens in front of the sensor should be left to the user's discretion. They're putting the minimum amount of stuff in front of the sensor that they can. You could argue that is about cost saving, about simplifying production, and that's absolutely justifiable. I think that's perfectly reasonable. But it does also mean that for the true professional, you're able to say, yeah, this is the type of lens mount, the type of filtration, the type of process that I want to work with, and you can have one camera then that is using anything from a tiny little pancake lens from a mirrorless camera all the way through to LPL or PL mounted gigantic cine zooms.
Very flexible and gives creative control.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what it's all about really, is being able to pick the right tool. So yeah, looking forward to seeing what happens with it. I think one of the things that I know people are going to be asking is, well, can I get stuff in Z mount? And fortunately, in the world of sort of photographic adapters, that does predominantly exist already because it's a very adaptable mount. So that's good. We've been producing stuff in Z mount already, so we have the mounts for the Zeiss Nano Primes, for example, which we've been producing as conversion kits for quite a while now. We have those in L mount, Z mount, RF. They're natively E mount. So that's a very adaptable situation. That's where some of these parts on the desk come from.
Okay.
And yeah, so we're very familiar with the mechanics of the Z mount. I have to say, if I had to pick one based on my ideal for this kind of bayonet mount, I still feel like there's a space for it to be more perfect. It's like just about everything about the Z mount is better. It's a little bit more robust. The tolerances seem better thought out. There are some subtleties to how it's designed, which are really nice.
Okay.
And it turns the opposite way to all the others, because I mean, if you're a Nikon shooter, and I was a Nikon still shooter for a very long time, it's not the end of the world. We're going to see a lot of dropped lenses.
It's a bit worrying.
Honestly, it's a silly thing, but we're going to see dropped lenses, dropped adapters, because things go the wrong way. They very elegantly handled that for the focus rotation, because of the fact that everything's virtual and electronic. You can just say, it doesn't matter, turn it the other way, just tell the software to do something else. But yeah, that muscle memory thing.
It's a tricky one. I mean, going back to EF mount, and the first times we had mounts with locking rings on them instead of, and we have the question then about which direction do you turn? And there's all sorts of user pushback about this doesn't feel right. I feel like I'm going to drop the lens.
Exactly. And it's funny because those learned behaviours are so contextual. So with a PL mount lens, you offer the lens into the mount and you lock the locking ring, and then you know that it's there.
And that's what a lot of people like about PL.
People are very comfortable with that. If you just go unlocking the locking ring, there's a very strong chance you're going to drop stuff on the floor. And yet, we discovered from kind of user behaviour that when you give them an EF mount with the same style, where you present it straight in and rotate the lock, that would lead to people undoing the lock and going, oh, it's fallen on the floor. Which it's kind of baffling, but it's about the context. They've become used to what EF denotes and are used to that bayonet action. Obviously, there's a bunch of different solutions to that. I like the way that Red handle their locking mounts on the camera. Bayonet to fit and rotate to lock. We have a similar thing going on with our EF mounts, and it's become, pretty much an expected way of working. The way we initially approached it, treating the EF more like a PL production style lens, evidently didn't suit people. I know other manufacturers have taken that route as well. But it's just a case of feeling out what what works for people, I guess.
Absolutely.
But it's another thing for us to have to think about. The list never ends.
Indeed, lots of parallel things going on.
Honestly, if it opens up E-mount lenses to shoot on Red, great. That's a really good thing.
There are lots of them out there, industry standard pretty much for broadcast here.
Absolutely, and we have E-mount stuff across other purposes as well. So when you're shooting with gimbal, when you're shooting with a variety of other kit around, we have E-mount on the various hybrid and stills cameras that we use as well. So it's become a de facto standard for a lot of people that was inaccessible on Red. So that's a real positive as well on that front. Just to talk a bit about where we're at with development stuff as well.
I can see something on the deck.
Indeed. So this little guy, basically, I'm going to give you an idea of where we're at. This is a physical prototype, but not actually running any software as it stands at the moment. But this is effectively a drop-in LCD-based ND designed to work with the Canon mount. We talked about this previously. It's a good, solid, robust piece of kit, as you'd expect from us. This is all CNC'd metal, no plastic in sight. And we are close to complete on this one. Firmware is mostly there. We have an iOS app which is just about complete. So we're close to production run on these, which will be quite exciting. Very neat, practical, simple approach that kind of gives a bit more life to a mount adapter that probably quite a lot of people have got, but maybe they don't use it so much given the rather poor quality of the ND that goes with it. And of course there are other mounts out there that use this same compatible drop-in filter approach. So yeah, that's coming along nicely. It's I'm pleased with how compact we've managed to get that. It's barely any bigger than the manual equivalent. What we've been looking at in parallel with that, I can't remember if we've talked about this publicly or not, is a revolver cartridge that uses the same technology.
Yes, I think we touched on as a maybe.
Yeah, that's it. So this is actually well into the prototyping stages now since we last spoke publicly about it. It's a completely compatible revolver cartridge, so it fits any revolver that is already out there. It will just drop straight in. It has the same LCD ND that we're looking at here, the LC Tech design. It has the same Bluetooth functionality and iOS app for remote control of the ND. The same menu system on the side with a little OLED and scroll wheel for changing settings. But the critical thing is it has a neat little thumb wheel that you rotate, which swaps to a clear filter.
Okay, without taking
the cartridge out. So that then adheres to the principle which I really prefer, which is you need to be able to have a clear as well as your ND. So yeah, that will open up the possibility for anybody with a revolver mount to have an electronic alternative. Yeah, that is going all the way back to DSMC2 cameras, and yeah, we'll give a kind of best of both worlds. So that'll mean effectively, as a revolver owner, you could have solid glass NDs in single stop increments, or a single cartridge that covers up to 2.1, or you can have the electronic version with a clear and then a 2 to 7 stop electronic ND with infinite adjustability and remote control.
Very good.
Yeah, so it's exciting stuff. We're pushing really hard to get that done as well. It is a case for us of trying to spot all of the niches, all of the places where we think this could work for someone. And obviously we've got a lot of respect for the very large number of people out there who use the revolver. You know, it means that we can continue to reward them on their investment. You know, it's a piece of kit that continues to be completely compatible, even though, you know, we're going back a lot of years now for the first iteration of those. And you know, it has some little side benefits. People have always had to ask us, what's the coverage like for VV with revolver? And it's just a little bit of an edge case. It has the height for full frame, and it only just has the height, has the width, which means that depending on the lens design, you might get little bits of corner vignetting, or you might not. Makes it hard for us to just hand on heart say, yeah, it just works. It's a complicated conversation. It's frustrating. Obviously, this has a much larger glass area because it's only requiring us to move 2 pieces of glass inside.
I see,
So, yeah, safe VV coverage on that front, which is nice.
And it goes back to the same philosophy as Red, isn't it? Give the user the creative control and decide what they put between.
Yes, exactly. That's it. Yeah,
there are pitfalls of one, there's pitfalls of the other, so it's giving that choice to the user.
The downsides that you are going to get with an electronic ND, you know, there will be polarization artifacts and color artifacts, you know, as there are with any system that uses that methodology. But there are upsides, you know, electronic remote control, infinitely variable stops.
Exactly.
Lots of bonuses as well. You know, and I'm not above, you know, I'm not going to say, no, that's not good enough for us, full stop. If it meets an acceptable standard and provides the right benefits, then yeah, we're good to go. And obviously LC Tech, we've been in touch with for quite a few years now. and their latest glass, they're actually just marginally customizing some stuff for us to get the specification that we need to make things work. But yeah, the technical standard is now where it needs to be in order for us to say, yes, it has ups and downs, in terms of the technical choices, but it's not compromised in a way that makes me think, that's not professional enough. So yeah, it's a pro-choice. It's a quality idea, but you then, just as when you choose a lens and you think, okay, well, I'm going to need the coverage that a zoom gets me, and it means I'm going to have to compromise my f-stop, or I need that little bit of extra length on a zoom. The only one available drops an f-stop as I get to the end of the zoom. Okay, we'll live with it. Or I need the speed, but it's going to be difficult to get the sharpness that we're after because we can't afford the most expensive primes. These are all up and down decisions, and it doesn't make any of those items any less professional.
And the fact that it's compatible means that it's realistic. You could have that in your toolkit and a normal revolver cartridge.
Yes, exactly. Yeah,
and make that decision on site.
Yeah, absolutely. So you can find yourself, with the option without it being a big deal. So yeah, that's where we're at on that front. So that is a revolver LC. That would be called LC for liquid crystal. This is an LC Mini ND for people who want to keep up with our internal terminology. So that's the one that fits with the Canon drop-in.
I see.
And then the big question, the flagship one, the Strata Electro, which has been giving us such grief in terms of supply chain.
I can't help but notice isn't on the table. It isn't
on the table right now, exactly. We are at a state of waiting for approved production-ready glass for it, which we've changed suppliers. We have recalibrated requirements to really be definitive about the quality that's needed. And it's hugely frustrating for me personally because it's a damn good product that I want to get out there.
Absolutely.
But I'm not, that one is the flagship. It's the one where I am going to say not until it's 100%. And its whole purpose is to be a pure optical version of this filtration concept. That doesn't have those other peculiar artifacts that you would get with polarization, with effects on the bokeh, all sorts of other things that can occur.
It's for when a very high technical standard is needed.
Yes, exactly.
Without compromise.
And it is built in that way as well. We have shied away from plastic just about everywhere we can. There are lots of places where other manufacturers have built motorized filter systems, for example, and it's necessarily built to function at a price, which means that you have plastic filter trays, you have nylon gears operating mechanisms and that kind of thing. It's probably over the top, but everything that is inside it is to a super high standard. So the way the mechanisms move, they're miniature lead screws with, machine tool style control of the position. We've taken it to a high level.
Absolutely. And I'd love to do a stream when we've got a prototype and can look at some of that.
Oh yeah, exactly. Yeah, it is fun to look at.
Absolutely.
But yeah, the jam tomorrow of when can that be ordered continues to be tomorrow. But very exciting, I guess, from our side. It means that there's going to be a point in, maybe it'll be the next time we convene for one of these chats, maybe it'll be the time after, but we're going to have a whole raft of new stuff all hitting the ground at the same time.
And all for a slightly different audience, which feels like a bit of a change for us.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So, I mean, our pro users, our stalwarts in the natural history production community, people like that, yes, the Strata Electro is the big deal. But there are also stacks of people out there who are using our adapters for their robust nature for things like array setups for sheeting plates and things like that. In a lot of situations, they are after, because of the multi-camera, multi-lens nature of things, they're after affordable solutions for ND. So there are other
control and things like that.
Exactly. So there are other niches that we're addressing there. I would like to think as well that the LC Mini ND for the EF drop-in, hopefully that's a way of demonstrating the kind of quality that we can produce to an audience that we would have been outside of their budget in the first instance. So that'll be fun to see what people make of KipperTie when they're coming to it from a different perspective.
Absolutely,
they'll see the value.
Fascinating stuff.
Yeah. So that's about it for today. Have a fair amount to say there. I know I've probably waffled on a couple of minutes longer than I should.
Only one, you're good.
Oh, yeah, not too bad, not too bad. We'll try and be a little sooner next time around. Keep you up to date with the latest from KipperTie, and if you have questions and comments, feel free to drop them down below in the comments. We'll take a look through those and do our best to come back to you. Same for our social media channels. We do our best to reply to people there. A lot of the time, you're genuinely, you're just getting one of the team. So the answer is
a lot of us,
yeah, exactly. That's it. There's no faceless corporation at KipperTie to fight your way past. So we try and get you the answers that you need, and we'll see you again next time.